Alistair Pearce was not born wealthy. He grew up in the working-class neighborhood of Bayside, Queens, a far cry from the towering luxury penthouses that would later become his sanctuaries. In those early days, he shared a cramped two-bedroom apartment with his parents and younger brother, and though resources were scarce, dreams were never in short supply. His mother instilled in him a hunger for excellence. She worked 2 jobs, one as a secretary at a downtown law firm, the other as a waitress at a local diner. His father, a carpenter by trade, spent his free hours teaching young Alistair the value of focus and persistence. It was in high school where Alistair discovered his gift for persuasion. He signed up for the debate club, determined to elevate his station in life. He was the kind of teenager who arrived early and stayed late, fine-tuning arguments and devouring books on philosophy and economics. During one of the after-school meets, his coach introduced him to the concept of global commerce and the power of entrepreneurship. "If you learn to connect with people, you can move mountains," his coach had said. Alistair took these words to heart. By the time he reached Columbia University on a scholarship, Alistair was a polished charmer with a razor-sharp mind. At Columbia, he crossed paths with a philanthropic organization headed by none other than Bill Gates, who was hosting a lecture series on innovation and technology for budding entrepreneurs. Alistair listened intently, internalizing every syllable about growth, disruption, and philanthropy. After the lecture, he mustered the courage to walk up to Gates and introduce himself. Though their exchange was brief, a simple handshake and a quick compliment, it left a lasting impression on Alistair's mind. The world he aspired to inhabit was within reach. It was in his junior year that he met Amelia Williams. She was, at the time, studying journalism, known for her deep empathy and unwavering moral compass. Their first meeting was marked by clashing personalities. Alistair saw the world as a chessboard waiting to be conquered, while Amelia believed in uplifting marginalized voices, her articles often championing the less fortunate. Despite their differences, they found each other's convictions magnetic. Their mutual ambition, he for success, she for advocacy, sparked an electric connection. After a whirlwind courtship, they graduated and set off into the world hand in hand. Alistair joined a Wall Street firm where he quickly rose through the ranks, thanks to his charisma and sharp business acumen. Amelia found success as an investigative journalist, her articles focusing on corporate corruption and social injustice. She was proud of Alistair's achievements, and he admired her unwavering pursuit of truth. As the years passed, Alistair's hunger for success only deepened. He ventured out on his own, founding Pearce Global Enterprises, a conglomerate that dabbled in technology investments, venture capital, real estate, and philanthropic arms. He quickly developed the Midas touch. Any startup he endorsed multiplied in value almost overnight. Journalists wrote headlines like "The Alistair Effect" or "Wall Street's New Golden Boy." He courted additional investments from figures like Warren Buffett, who took a private lunch with Alistair to discuss strategic partnerships. Alistair was on top of the world, hungry for the next challenge. By their 7th anniversary, he and Amelia had become fixtures in Manhattan's elite circles. The couple often attended black-tie galas, both philanthropic and business-oriented, rubbing shoulders with names like Jeff Bezos and Martha Stewart. Amelia believed passionately in using her and Alistair's influence for the greater good. She set up her own non-profit, the Horizon Foundation, aimed at providing educational resources to underprivileged communities, not unlike the ones in which both she and Alistair had grown up. Despite their public harmony, small cracks began to form. Alistair's devotion to work turned into an obsession. Late-night dinners transformed into hurried phone calls, and weekends turned into networking events. Amelia's philanthropic work required empathy and emotional presence, attributes that seemed to be waning in Alistair. He would nod during her heartfelt explanations about Horizon's plans, but appeared distracted by his phone buzzing with endless notifications. To make matters worse, Alistair had developed a reputation as a risk-taker, not just in business, but in his personal life. Whispers circulated that perhaps the billionaire was indulging in the high life, Even as rumors were swirling, Emilia tried to maintain faith. She believed his moral center, forged in the crucible of a humble upbringing, would eventually guide him back to her. Still, an unspoken distance lingered. They lived in the same penthouse, attended the same events, and supported each other's charities, yet everything felt somehow hollow. Neither was completely aware that the seeds of betrayal and tragedy had already been planted. On a sweltering August evening, Alistair attended a networking event at the Plaza Hotel. The crowd included angel investors, tech founders from Silicon Valley, and a range of socialites looking to see and be seen. Emilia was out of town, investigating a corporate pollution scandal in Florida for a feature article. Though she had asked Alistair to accompany her to gather insights on a philanthropic angle, he insisted he needed to stay in New York for crucial investor meetings. The ballroom of the plaza was abuzz with conversation and clinking champagne glasses when Natalia Moretti walked in. She was a striking woman with intense hazel eyes and dark wavy hair that cascaded over her shoulders. Natalia was a top partner at a boutique real estate firm specializing in luxury properties around the world. Renowned for her ability to close deals that seemed impossible, she was rumored to have links with the upper echelons of European society. Their first interaction was accidental. Alistair was in the midst of impressing a group of potential venture partners when Natalia, carrying a glass of red wine, edged her way into the circle to greet an acquaintance. She brushed her arm against Alistair's, leaving a faint swirl of perfume that lingered. He paused mid-sentence, momentarily disarmed by her presence. Natalia apologized softly, her accent betraying a childhood in Milan. She smiled, and without skipping a beat, he introduced himself. Conversation flowed effortlessly. They discussed luxury real estate markets in Milan and Manhattan, the synergy between real estate and tech ventures, and the philanthropic possibilities attached to property development. Natalia found his ambition alluring, and Alistair was captivated by her poise and intellect. She spoke with the assertiveness of someone who had carved her place in the world without compromise. As the evening progressed, Alistair found himself seeking Natalia's company more than his usual circle of investors and CEOs. They slipped away to a quiet corner of the grand hall, trading stories about their families and shared love for travel. Natalia's parents owned a small vineyard outside Verona, and she recalled long summer afternoons harvesting grapes and laughing around rustic dinners. Alistair spoke of the Queen's apartment he grew up in, a world away from their luxurious surroundings. There was a sense that both had fought hard to distance themselves from their humble beginnings, to reinvent themselves on a grand stage. One conversation led to another, and soon they were the last guests strolling out of the plaza's opulent corridors. "There's something about you, Alistair," Natalia said, her voice hushed. "You have the same spark I see in the eyes of dreamers, but you also carry a darkness." He chuckled, unsure how to respond. "Darkness comes with the territory, I suppose," he said cryptically. They parted with a lingering handshake, their eyes holding a question that neither was quite ready to answer. That night, in his penthouse overlooking Central Park, Alistair paced the marble floors, replaying his evening. A sense of excitement churned in his stomach. He was no stranger to attention from beautiful, powerful women, but something about Natalia felt different, like a magnet pulling him toward a new frontier of possibility or danger. A text message lit up his phone. It was from Natalia. "Lovely to meet you. Let's talk real estate synergy soon. N." He smiled, feeling both thrilled and uneasy. Guilt nagged at him, a subtle reminder that Emilia was not just his wife, she was his partner, his moral anchor, the one person who had believed in him since their college days. Yet he couldn't deny the rush. By the time the clock struck midnight, Alistair had convinced himself this was merely business. Nothing more. But of course, it wasn't just business. Over the following weeks, the texts between him and Natalia escalated from formal chatter about commercial properties to flirtatious banter. She shared pictures of her travels to Barcelona, and he responded with snapshots of the Manhattan skyline at sunrise. Neither openly acknowledged the emotional affair in progress, but both felt the mounting tension. When Emilia returned from Florida, weary from her investigation into corporate malfeasance, Alistair tried his best to revert to the loving husband. He listened as she detailed the toxins being dumped into local water supplies. She lamented how the marginalized communities living in those areas had no legal or financial recourse. Alistair nodded sympathetically, but his mind drifted scanning for the next message from Natalia. That was the beginning of the emotional rift. Emilia was perceptive enough to notice Alistair's distraction. She chalked it up to business stress. After all, he was under pressure to finalize a massive tech acquisition. In an effort to reconnect, Emilia proposed a trip to Italy, a combination of charitable work for the Horizon Foundation and a chance for the two of them to unwind. "I need to be in New York for a board meeting," Alistair lied. "I promise I'll join you as soon as I can." He had grown used to weaving half-truths into his everyday life. The lines between deception and reality began to blur. Still, each time he glanced at his wedding band, a wave of guilt surged. Yet, it never fully halted his clandestine communications with Natalia. He rationalized that as long as things remained unconsummated physically, he wasn't committing a real betrayal. He was wrong, and on some level he knew it. The stage was set. The billionaire, with a loving wife who had been his steadfast companion through thick and thin, now found himself entangled in a gravitational pull toward another woman. Unbeknownst to him, Natalia's connections to Emilia went far deeper than he could have imagined. The seeds of betrayal had been planted, and the revelations to come would shock them all. With his empire expanding, Alistair often found himself traveling across continents. It was on one such trip to Milan, ostensibly to meet with luxury property developers, that he arranged a rendezvous with Natalia. They met at a quaint cafe near the iconic Duomo. Tourists snapped pictures, pigeons fluttered around the cathedral steps, and the golden sunlight danced off the white marble facade. Natalia wore a flowing cream-colored dress, a vintage camera hanging around her neck. "You look like a tourist," Alistair teased. "I am one," she said with a laugh, snapping a picture of him before he could react. "This city was home once, but now I feel like a foreigner wherever I go." He knew that feeling. A perpetual wanderer, never truly belonging, despite a grand penthouse in New York and estates scattered worldwide. They spent hours strolling the cobblestone streets, wandering into boutique shops, and enjoying gelato by the Galleria Vittorio Emanuele II. Every moment felt stolen sweet, thrilling and tinged with a sense of impending doom. Emilia, meanwhile, was in Africa on behalf of the Horizon Foundation. She was visiting schools in rural communities, overseeing the construction of wells that would provide clean water. In her video calls to Alistair, her face glowed with genuine fulfillment. She urged him to join her for the final week of her trip, to witness the children's gratitude and see the transformative power of charity firsthand. Alistair nodded each time, offering non-committal excuses about urgent business. Within hours of hanging up, he'd find himself at Natalia's side once more. On their final night in Milan, Alistair and Natalia danced close at a private club. The music was slow and dreamy, each note echoing the closeness they felt. Before the night was over, he booked a lavish suite at the Four Seasons. There, he crossed the line that had been tenuously drawn in his head. Months of emotional entanglement became physical. The guilt that panged him afterward was quickly drowned by the euphoria of something new, forbidden, and potent. What Alistair didn't know was that Natalia's best friend, her confidant since their teenage years in Verona, was none other than Emilia Williams. The two had bonded during Emilia's summer abroad in Italy, a cultural exchange program back in her high school days. They had kept in touch over the years, though distance and time had made their relationship more sporadic. Natalia never made the connection between Emilia Williams and Emilia Pierce, the prominent journalist and philanthropist married to Alistair. Nor did Emilia realize that the best friend from her youth, Natalia Moretti, had turned into the captivating real estate mogul now linked with her husband's new business ventures. Fate conspired to reveal this tangled web one autumn afternoon. Emilia had returned to New York, and Natalia was in Manhattan to finalize a real estate deal for a luxury condominium project. Exhausted, Emilia decided to pick up Italian pastries from a small bakery near her office, one that she and Natalia used to rave about years ago. Old memories drifted back. They were once young dreamers with big plans, strolling those very streets. As she stepped onto the sidewalk, pastry bag in hand, she nearly bumped into Natalia, who was in animated conversation on her phone. They locked eyes, and for a moment neither recognized the other. Then realization dawned, and their faces broke into shocked smiles. They embraced, laughing at the sheer coincidence. "Natalia, my goodness, it's been ages," Emilia exclaimed, her voice tinged with delight. "What are you doing in New York?" "Oh, I'm here for real estate, some big deals," Natalia replied, equally thrilled. "I've been meaning to reconnect for so long, but everything's been so busy." Emilia led Natalia to a nearby cafe, the same place they once frequented. Over cappuccinos, they updated each other on their lives. Emilia proudly mentioned her marriage to Alistair Pierce, the big-shot entrepreneur. Natalia blinked in surprise but didn't reveal her hidden affair. The coincidence was startling. Could it be that this entire time she'd been unknowingly entangled with her best friend's husband? As Natalia listened to Emilia's stories, guilt coiled in her stomach. It felt like a betrayal of the deepest kind, made worse by the fact that Emilia spoke with such reverence about Alistair's achievements and their shared philanthropy. Yet the conversation also reignited a bond between the two women that had lain dormant. They reminisced about summer nights in Verona, about sneaking out to watch fireworks by the river. Emilia, for her part, felt a rush of nostalgia and relief at reconnecting with her old friend. She insisted Natalia visit the penthouse for dinner one evening. "I'd love for Alistair to meet you. He admires strong, successful women. He'll be thrilled to hear about your real estate ventures," she said innocently, unaware of the landmine she was stepping onto. Natalia forced a smile, her thoughts a flurry of panic. How was she supposed to handle this? Confess outright? Disappear? She left the cafe feeling as though her world had been flipped upside down. That night, she considered calling Alistair to reveal the news. But each time she tried, her heart pounded so violently that she couldn't go through with it. She was overwhelmed by shame and fear of losing both Alistair and Emilia. Unaware of Natalia's discovery, Alistair continued to carry on as before. Business deals by day, secret messages to Natalia by night. The tension soared like a drawn bowstring, set to snap at the slightest provocation. As Natalia contemplated how to handle the situation, destiny inched closer to orchestrating a collision of heartbreak and betrayal. The day of the dinner arrived far too quickly for Natalia's liking. Emilia had texted her multiple times, brimming with excitement. "Alistair is looking forward to meeting you," she wrote, adding cheerful emojis. Each message was like a dagger of guilt, plunging deeper into Natalia's conscience. That evening, Natalia donned a modest black dress, neither too flashy nor too demure. She took extra care with her makeup, hoping to mask her anxiety. The elevator ride to the top floor of Alistair and Emilia's penthouse felt interminable, each floor dinging like a reminder of her betrayal. When the doors slid open, Emilia greeted her with a warm hug. Alistair stood just behind her, wearing an impeccably tailored suit and a polite smile. The moment Alistair's eyes landed on Natalia, a jolt of shock registered in his gaze, but he quickly schooled his expression. If Emilia noticed anything amiss, she showed no sign. She took Natalia by the hand and introduced the two as though they were strangers. "Natalia, meet Alistair Pierce, my husband. Alistair, this is Natalia Moretti, my oldest friend from Italy." "It's an honor," Natalia said, her voice carefully controlled. Alistair cleared his throat, stepping forward to shake her hand. Tension radiated between them, an undercurrent only they could feel. "You have a fascinating background," Alistair said smoothly. "Emilia's told me a bit about your real estate ventures. Very impressive." Natalia forced a small laugh. "I'm still learning, but real estate has its allure." Emilia led them into the grand living area. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a glittering Manhattan skyline. A large, abstract painting by a famous contemporary artist adorned one wall, an anniversary gift Alistair had given Amelia years ago. Natalia wondered if Amelia had any inkling how much of a gift it would be just to know the truth right now. Dinner was a meticulously prepared affair catered by one of the city's top private chefs. Each course arrived in perfect succession, a culinary masterpiece from amuse-bouche to dessert. Amelia made lively conversation, discussing travel memories with Natalia and peppering Alistair with details about the philanthropic possibilities in partnering with Natalia's networks. Alistair kept his composure, occasionally chiming in with insights about the real estate market, but beneath the polished veneer, he was unraveling. He kept sneaking glances at Natalia, trying to gauge if she intended to drop the bomb. She, in turn, did her best to ignore those anxious looks. Every time she caught his eye, she felt a swirl of sorrow and longing, along with the weight of betrayal. When dessert, an elegant chocolate mousse, was served, Amelia proposed a toast. She lifted her wineglass and smiled radiantly. To old friendships and new beginnings. Natalia, you've been such a positive influence in my life. I'm overjoyed that we can reconnect. And Alistair, she turned to him, eyes shining with pride. Thank you for being the man who supports me and stands by my side. I love you both dearly. The toast hit them like a punch to the gut. Natalia stared at the dark liquid in her glass, her stomach churning. Alistair mustered a smile but could barely speak. In that moment, Natalia felt an overwhelming urge to confess, to purge the deceit. Yet fear silenced her. She took a sip of wine, the bitter tang mirroring her tumultuous emotions. After dinner, Amelia excused herself to take a phone call regarding a breaking story. Alistair led Natalia out onto the penthouse balcony, where a gentle breeze carried the hum of the city below. The lights of Times Square flickered in the distance, painting the horizon in neon glows. This changes everything, Natalia said softly, arms folded protectively around herself. Alistair exhaled, his breath shaky. I had no idea you two even knew each other, let alone were best friends. It was years ago, but our bond is still there. Natalia shook her head, tears threatening to spill. Amelia is such a good person. This is unbearable. Alistair's chest felt tight. He reached out, but she stepped back, refusing comfort. Natalia, Don't, she cut him off. Don't say you're sorry, I was complicit in this. But now that I know who she is, who you both are to each other, I can't keep doing this. He looked away, torn between desire and guilt. I'm not ready to lose you. The confession felt more truthful than anything he'd said in months. She swallowed a lump in her throat. Then what about Amelia? He had no answer. Silence stretched between them, filled by the city's distant roar. Eventually, they rejoined Amelia inside, forging smiles. Natalia excused herself soon after, feigning an early morning meeting. Amelia walked her to the door, hugging her tight. Let's meet up soon, okay? Natalia forced a nod, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, of course. The elevator doors closed on Natalia's conflicted face. Amelia turned to Alistair, who stood in the foyer, a shadow cast across his features. She quirked an eyebrow, noticing his strain. Are you feeling okay? You seem off tonight. Alistair mustered a tight smile. Just business stress, he lied. She didn't question further, though worry creased her brow. In the days to follow, Natalia wrestled with the moral dilemma. Should she come clean to Amelia? Should she end things with Alistair entirely? Her heart warred against her conscience, and for the first time in her life, she felt powerless. Meanwhile, Alistair clung to the illusion that he could somehow keep both women in his life, failing to see that his own deception was a ticking time bomb, poised to detonate. The days after the dinner stretched into an agonizing haze for Alistair and Natalia. They became scarce with each other. A few curt text messages were exchanged, mostly centered on business or avoiding the subject of Amelia altogether. Meanwhile, Emilia noticed that Natalia's enthusiastic chatter about reconnecting suddenly cooled. Instead of lunch dates or coffee catch-ups, Natalia claimed swamped schedules and urgent real estate deadlines. Alistair buried himself in finalizing an ambitious acquisition, a cutting-edge biotech startup focused on cancer research. On the surface, it was a philanthropic investment that aligned with Emilia's passion for social good. In reality, it served as his distraction. He told himself that by dedicating resources to a noble cause, he could somehow atone for his sins. Yet each victory in the boardroom left him feeling hollow when he returned to the penthouse at night. Emilia continued her journalistic pursuits with unrelenting zeal. The Florida pollution piece had garnered significant attention, spurring investigations into environmental crimes. She was invited to speak on major news networks about corporate accountability. Despite her professional triumphs, her personal life felt increasingly distant from her husband's. At times, she sensed Alistair's guilt, but interpreted it as overwork or high-stakes pressure. Whenever she tried to engage him in deeper conversation, he deflected, claiming exhaustion or urgent emails. Natalia was equally tormented. Her once pristine sense of integrity had been compromised by an affair with her best friend's husband. She considered disappearing, taking a lengthy trip to Europe until the ache subsided. But every time her phone buzzed with Alistair's name, her will faltered. She found ways to reply with measured politeness, refusing his invitations, but never fully severing the tie. The real estate deal she was working on in Manhattan was massive. A cluster of luxury condos near the High Line, sold at record prices. Investors clamored for a slice of the venture, propelling Natalia's reputation to new heights. But the success felt tainted, overshadowed by her personal shame. One evening, Emilia reached out, insisting on an overdue catch-up. Natalia couldn't refuse without arousing suspicion. They met in a chic wine bar in Soho. Low lighting and rustic wooden beams offered an intimate setting for the friends' reunion. Emilia was glowing. She had recently secured new funding for the Horizon Foundation, which would expand its clean water initiatives. Natalia forced herself to meet Emilia's eyes, the guilt a leaden weight on her chest. "I'm proud of you, Emmy," she said, reverting to the old nickname she used years ago. "You've always been so determined to make the world better." Emilia's smile faltered slightly, a hint of sadness creeping in. "I'm trying, but I've been worried about you. It's like you're avoiding me." Natalia fiddled with her wine glass. "It's just work," she lied. "Things have been chaotic." "I get that." Emilia reached across the table to squeeze Natalia's hand. "But we've been apart for so long, and I really care about you. If there's anything bothering you, I'm here to listen." Natalia's eyes stung with tears. She refused to shed. The moment stretched like an elastic band on the verge of snapping. She opened her mouth to speak, perhaps to confess everything, but a jolt of fear overtook her. She wanted to protect Emilia from the pain, but also feared losing her forever. Instead, she smiled weakly. "I appreciate it," she said. "Things will calm down soon, I promise." The rest of the night was filled with safe topics, memories of their teenage escapades, cultural differences, and Emilia's future travel plans. They parted ways with a warm hug. Natalia boarded a taxi with the sinking realization that each day she kept silent, the betrayal grew more painful. The next morning, Alistair was on his way to the office, checking emails on his phone in the back of his chauffeured car, when he spotted a message from Natalia. It was brief. "We need to talk. Meet me at Central Park near the Bethesda fountain at 6 p.m. Anxious energy coursed through him. He replied in the affirmative, clearing his evening schedule. When he finally slipped away from his corporate responsibilities, the October twilight cast long shadows across the park. Tourists meandered, street performers played violins, and city dwellers jogged along the winding paths. Natalia stood by the fountain, arms wrapped around herself for warmth, gazing into the water as if it held answers. Alistair approached cautiously, noticing the faint tremor in her posture. She turned, her eyes filled with conflict. "Emilia deserves better than this," she said, voice thick with emotion. "She's my oldest friend. I can't keep living this lie." Alistair inhaled sharply. "I know it's wrong, but what do you want me to do? Tell her the truth? End everything?" The questions tumbled out, each loaded with desperation. Natalia looked at him, tears threatening to spill. "I want to stop hurting her, and frankly, hurting myself. I can't be the other woman, not to her husband." He reached out, fingers grazing hers. "What if I talk to her? Maybe what?" she snapped. "She loves you, Alistair. She sees you as a partner in life and in doing good for this world. Do you have any idea how shattered she'd be?" His throat tightened. He was caught between the reality of his affair and the love he still harbored for Emilia in some corner of his being. "I don't have all the answers, but I do know I care about you, and I'm terrified of losing you both." Natalia let out a shaky breath. "You can't have both. That's not fair to any of us." She turned her face away, struggling to maintain composure. "I need space. I need time to think. Please, don't contact me unless it's something important." Alistair watched her walk away, her silhouette fading into the crowd. Each step she took felt like a blow to his chest. For the first time, he felt the sting of consequences. The illusions he had built of controlling every aspect of his life were starting to crumble. That night, Alistair returned to his penthouse later than usual. Emilia was waiting, her eyes filled with concern. "Is everything all right? You're never this late without calling." He mustered a tight smile. "Just a rough day at the office. Negotiations dragged on." The lie spilled out with familiar ease. She approached, wrapping her arms around him in a tender embrace. "I'm here if you want to talk." "You know that, right?" He swallowed hard, nodding but unable to form words. As Emilia slipped into the bedroom, Alistair lingered in the living area, the city skyline spread out before him like an indifferent witness to his secrets. He sank into a leather armchair, the enormity of his choices closing in. Despite the plush surroundings and his monumental achievements, Alistair Pierce had never felt more powerless. In the weeks that followed, Natalia avoided Alistair as much as possible. She turned down invitations to corporate gatherings where he might appear, and even refused a potential business collaboration with Pierce Global Enterprises. Instead, she diverted her focus to international markets, traveling often to Dubai and Hong Kong. Each journey was a calculated effort to create distance, not just physical miles, but emotional boundaries. Emilia, on the other hand, found herself busier than ever. The Horizon Foundation had expanded to new territories, and her investigative journalism had gained traction, bringing attention to corrupt practices worldwide. She was lauded at a gala in Washington, D.C., where she delivered a rousing speech about the responsibility of the powerful to protect the powerless. Sitting in the audience, Alistair felt a rush of conflicting emotions, pride in Emilia's accomplishments and a churning guilt. As the applause thundered, he realized how deeply he had taken her steadfast devotion for granted. Even so, he couldn't ignore the aching absence of Natalia, who had once been a source of intense excitement. The mutual friend who inadvertently brought Natalia and Emilia together again was a woman named Claudia Rossi, a fashion entrepreneur from Milan, who also spent considerable time in New York. While Claudia knew both women independently, she had never connected the dots about Emilia's marriage to Alistair. After all, Emilia usually went by her maiden name, Williams, in her journalistic and philanthropic work. One chilly evening, Claudia threw a private mixer at her newly opened boutique in Chelsea. Emilia and Natalia were both on the guest list. Despite Natalia's efforts to dodge Alistair's social circles, she couldn't refuse Claudia's heartfelt invitation without seeming rude. And so, fate brought the two women face to face again, this time without Alistair present. The boutique was a sleek modern space with minimalist decor. Soft jazz played in the background as well-dressed guests sipped champagne and perused racks of exclusive designs. Emilia spotted Natalia across the room and rushed over, eyes bright with happiness. "You're a tough woman to track down these days," Emilia teased lightly, offering her friend a hug. How have you been? Natalia's smile was polite, but her eyes flickered with turmoil. Busy, expanding our real estate footprint to Asia, so there's a lot of travel. Emilia nodded, genuinely impressed. I can't even imagine the logistics. Meanwhile, I'm off to Mexico next week for a documentary on migrant workers. Different worlds, but at least we're both staying busy. They strolled around the boutique, flipping through racks of dresses, occasionally pausing to admire a design. Eventually, Natalia cleared her throat. Emmy, there's something I need to tell you. The seriousness in her tone took Emilia by surprise. Is everything all right? Natalia's words faltered. She could feel the confession on her lips, but fear paralyzed her. The night they had dinner together, the guilt she felt, the heartbreak in Alistair's eyes at the Bethesda fountain, it all came rushing back. She hesitated, looking at Emilia's earnest, trusting face. Before she could speak, Claudia appeared, exclaiming her excitement that her two favorite Italians, a playful reference to Natalia's heritage and Emilia's love for Italian culture, were finally talking. With a forced laugh, Natalia let the moment slip away. Still, the evening wasn't over. Later, after Claudia's party had thinned out, Emilia and Natalia found themselves alone in a quiet corner, sipping the last of their champagne. The tension was palpable. Emilia placed a hand on Natalia's arm, sensing her friend's distress. You know you can tell me anything, right? Emilia said softly. I've been worried. You seem so restless. Natalia mustered a weary smile. Life is complicated. I just hope you know how much you mean to me. Emilia looked puzzled, but squeezed Natalia's hand gently. Of course I do. You're my oldest friend, practically family. If there's anything on your mind, I'm here, no matter what. Natalia's eyes misted. She wanted to say she was sorry, that she never intended to hurt Emilia. But the words lodged in her throat. Instead, she leaned in and kissed Emilia's cheek, a silent goodbye to their innocence. Despite Natalia's efforts, secrets have a way of surfacing. Emilia's investigative instincts, honed over years of digging out corporate wrongdoings, began to notice inconsistencies in Alistair's schedule. He'd mention meetings that didn't align with his electronic calendar, or business trips abruptly rescheduled without clear reasons. Her first real jolt of suspicion came when she stumbled upon a phone bill while organizing household documents. It contained numerous international calls to numbers she didn't recognize, made at odd hours. One of them, traced back to a Milan-based number, carried Natalia Moretti's name on a quick Google search. Emilia's heart pounded. Why would Alistair be calling Natalia so frequently, especially at times he claimed to be working late at the office? That evening she confronted him. Alistair, what's this about? She asked, holding up the bill. A swirl of dread filled her as she awaited his response. He blinked, scrambling for composure. Natalia and I were discussing a possible investment in her real estate expansions. You know, I look at international properties, he said in a measured tone. Emilia stared at him. At 2 a.m, multiple times in a week? Alistair's expression flickered with panic, but he quickly masked it. Time zones, Emilia. She's traveling a lot, so we catch each other whenever we can. It's not unusual. Her suspicion wasn't fully assuaged, but she backed off for the moment, unwilling to believe her husband and her closest friend could betray her so deeply. Yet an unsettling feeling gnawed at her. Over the next week she quietly collected bits of evidence, text messages that didn't align with Alistair's stated whereabouts, fleeting expressions of guilt or confusion on his face whenever Natalia's name came up. The final blow came when Claudia, blissfully unaware of the situation, mentioned to Emilia that she'd seen Alistair and Natalia together at a secluded table in a Michelin-starred restaurant. Claudia assumed it was a business discussion, praising the synergy between a real estate mogul and a venture capitalist. But the way she described their body language, leaning in close, heads nearly touching, made Emilia's stomach twist in knots. That night, Emilia stayed up late, rummaging through Alistair's office for answers. She told herself she needed clarity, some objective proof, before she let her suspicions destroy her marriage. Near the back of a locked drawer, she found receipts from the Milan Four Seasons, dates that matched the time she was in Africa, an invoice for an extravagant suite, dinners for two. Emilia sank into the leather chair, her heart pounding so fiercely she thought it might burst. Trembling, she dialed Natalia's number. Her friend answered, groggy with sleep. "Emmy, it's late. Is everything okay?" Emilia's voice quivered. "Don't lie to me," she managed. "Are you having an affair with my husband?" Silence. For a moment, Emilia heard only the thudding of her own heart. Then Natalia's voice broke, saturated with guilt. "Emmy, I'm so sorry." Emilia's world collapsed. Tears streamed down her face as she hurled questions, heartbreak fueling her rage. How long? Why? Didn't she realize Emilia would be devastated? Natalia's sobbing confessions spilled out. It started as business, developed into an emotional affair, escalated in Milan. She tried to end it. She never meant to hurt Emilia. The conversation ended with Emilia throwing the phone across the room, a furious wail echoing off the penthouse walls. Alistair, awakened by the commotion, rushed into his office. He found Emilia on the floor, shaking with sobs, the phone shattered at her feet. She looked at him with eyes blazing, anger and betrayal mingling with raw heartbreak. "You lied to me," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You betrayed me with my best friend. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Alistair opened his mouth, but no words came. He reached out to touch her, and she slapped his hand away, her grief crackling into fury. "Don't touch me!" she spat. He sank onto his knees. "Emilia, I'm sorry. I never wanted you to find out like this. I never meant to." "Don't you dare say you never meant to," she shot back, tears streaking her cheeks. "Every call, every meeting, every time you kissed her, those were choices. You destroyed us." Alistair's voice choked. "I love you." Emilia laughed bitterly, a hollow sound. "You don't even know what love is." She stood up, stepping away from him as though his very presence was toxic. Gathering her phone and keys, she stormed out of the penthouse. Alistair tried to follow, but the elevator doors shut in his face, leaving him alone with a rancid cocktail of remorse and despair. Emilia sought refuge at a hotel near Central Park, checking in under a different name to avoid prying eyes. She spent days in emotional freefall, ignoring Alistair's frantic texts and calls. Meanwhile, Natalia attempted to reach her, leaving voicemails that grew increasingly desperate. Emilia deleted them all, her heart too raw to hear Natalia's voice. News of the breakup spread discreetly among New York's social elite. Whispers circulated about Alistair's infidelity, though details were murky. The press began sniffing around, but Emilia's journalistic savvy kept the story from exploding into the tabloids. She had built her career on exposing truths, yet she found herself wanting to keep this deeply personal wound out of the public arena. Alistair threw himself into damage control, not just for his reputation, but in a clumsy attempt to rectify the irreparable. He tried contacting Emilia's friends, hoping they might mediate a reconciliation. He even sent a lengthy handwritten letter to her via courier, pouring out his regret. Emilia, however, refused to open it. Her only focus was on healing herself and grappling with the profound sense of betrayal from both her husband and her best friend. Natalia, racked with remorse, considered returning to Europe indefinitely, but she couldn't bear the thought of fleeing without trying to see Emilia face to face. She emailed Emilia once, "I know you hate me. I hate myself too. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." Emilia read it multiple times, vacillating between anger, sadness, and a longing for the friend she once had. Seeking clarity, Emilia went on a work assignment. She traveled to Mexico as planned, interviewing migrant families separated by harsh immigration laws. Amid their harrowing stories, she found a strange solace in witnessing resilience. These families faced unimaginable hardships, yet they persevered. Emilia's heartbreak, while immense, was not insurmountable compared to what she saw. The notion of resilience and the human capacity to rebuild struck a chord. Back in New York, Alistair's world was unraveling. He had always been a master of control, but now he was losing the two women who mattered most. His board of directors, sensing personal turmoil, grew uneasy about his leadership. Investors began to question whether a scandal might affect Pierce Global Enterprises' future. Papers were drawn, suggesting Alistair step back temporarily to focus on personal matters. One cold November evening, Alistair was at his office, alone after midnight. He stared at city lights, shimmering beyond the windows. A knock at the door broke the silence. To his surprise, Natalia stepped in, looking drained but resolute. "I had to see you," she said, voice subdued. "You've been ignoring my calls." He rubbed his temples. "I can't talk to you right now, Natalia. Everything is falling apart." She sighed. Sadness etched on her features. "I know, and I'm sorry, but maybe we need to figure out what comes next." Alistair turned to face her. "There is no next for us. Not when Emilia, God, I've ruined everything." His voice trembled. Natalia lowered her gaze. "Don't you think I know that? We both destroyed something sacred. I'm leaving for Milan in a few days. I need to get away, try to rebuild my life. I came to ask if you had anything you wanted me to tell Emilia, or if—" He cut her off, voice a raw rasp. "Tell her I never wanted to hurt her, that I'm sorry, and tell her I still love her." Tears threatened his composure, something he never allowed himself, but heartbreak had broken down his walls. Natalia nodded, tears in her own eyes. She stepped forward and gently placed a hand on his cheek for what felt like a final goodbye. In that moment, they both recognized that whatever passion had flared between them was overshadowed by the pain it had caused. The spark that once fueled their affair had burned too many bridges to ever be reignited with any semblance of joy. When Natalia left, Alistair sank into his chair, gazing at a framed photo of him and Emilia from happier times on a beach in Bali during their 3rd anniversary, smiles wide and carefree. Those people felt like strangers now, lost in the debris of betrayal. Emilia returned from Mexico with a renewed sense of purpose, but a heart still heavy. She arranged a meeting with Alistair, the first since she'd discovered the affair. They met in a private boardroom at the Horizon Foundation's office, neutral territory she deemed safer than the penthouse that once was their home. He arrived early, wearing a conservative suit that looked more funereal than corporate. She entered with her head held high, wearing no ring on her finger. Seeing that small detail stung him. They sat across from each other at a long table. Alistair broke the silence. "Thank you for agreeing to see me." Emilia folded her arms, expression unyielding. "I'm only here for practical reasons. We have properties, charities, and financial entanglements. I want to handle them responsibly." A flash of pain crossed his features. "You want a divorce?" She held his gaze. "What else is there? You cheated on me with my best friend. I can't forgive that." He inhaled, trying to keep his composure. "I've ended it with Natalia, I swear. I know it means nothing now, but it's over." Emilia bristled. "That doesn't erase what happened." Alistair nodded, words failing him. They discussed logistical matters, dividing assets, controlling stakes in philanthropic organizations, handling the press. Each sentence felt mechanical, no hint of the once uplifting partnership they'd shared. Just when they reached a semblance of an agreement, Emilia glanced at him, her eyes brimming with tears. "Why?" she whispered, voice cracking. "Why would you do this? Was I not enough?" Alistair's heart twisted. "It was never about you not being enough. It was my own ego, my own stupidity. I was chasing something excitement, maybe. I don't know. And I lost sight of what really mattered." She stood up abruptly, tears threatening to fall. "I can't do this right now," she choked, gathering her papers. "Please," he pleaded, standing as well. "Can we at least try counseling or—" She shook her head. "I can't look at you without seeing her, without seeing every lie you told." With that, Emilia stormed out. Alistair sank into his chair, feeling like a condemned man. The final nail in their coffin had been hammered in, or so he believed. Late that night, Alistair was woken by a frantic phone call from an unknown number. "Mr. Pierce, this is Dr. Rosen from Lenox Hill Hospital. Your wife, Amelia Pierce, there's been an accident." His blood ran cold. "What happened? Is she all right?" "She was brought in after a car accident. Please come immediately." He broke land speed records driving through Manhattan's deserted streets, arriving at the hospital in a frenzy. In the waiting area, he found an equally distraught Natalia, tears streaming down her face. She'd just arrived from the airport, apparently having heard the news through a mutual acquaintance at the police department. Emilia had been driving home after meeting a source for her next investigative story. She swerved to avoid an oncoming truck, and her car flipped. Her injuries were severe. For hours, they paced the corridors in tense silence, waiting for an update. By dawn, a surgeon emerged with a grave expression. "We did all we could," he said quietly. "I'm sorry." Alistair felt the world tilt, his body sagging against the wall. He heard Natalia's muffled sobs in the distance. The doctor explained the details: internal bleeding, head trauma, but Alistair couldn't register more than the finality of it. Emilia was gone. The funeral was a subdued yet heart-wrenching affair. Attendees ranged from world leaders and CEOs to humble community activists, testament to how many lives Emilia had touched. Flowers filled the cathedral, and eulogies poured in from across the globe. People hailed her as a champion of justice, a beacon of philanthropy, a kind and loving spirit gone too soon. Alistair stood near the casket, emotion raw on his face. He accepted condolences from strangers and friends alike, but one by one, people drifted past, uncertain how to console a man whose betrayal had been whispered about in hushed tones. Natalia remained on the periphery, grief shadowing her features. When the ceremony ended, she tried to approach Alistair. Their eyes locked, but neither could speak. A silent understanding passed between them. Their actions had set into motion a chain of events that ended in unimaginable tragedy. In the weeks that followed, Alistair was a ghost walking the halls of an empire he no longer cared for. He vacated the penthouse, unable to face the rooms still echoing with Emilia's laughter. Instead, he took up residence in a modest apartment near the Horizon Foundation's main office, channeling all his resources into expanding Emilia's philanthropic vision. Driven by guilt, he poured millions into charitable causes. He established the Amelia Williams Pierce Scholarship Fund, granting full tuition to underprivileged youth from Queens. He funded investigative journalism grants in her name, ensuring her legacy of truth-seeking lived on. The public, learning of his anguish, softened their judgment. Some saw it as penance, others as a final tribute to the woman he had so deeply wronged. Natalia stayed in Milan for the most part, refusing to engage in any new real estate deals in New York. She kept a low profile, dedicating herself to smaller projects in her hometown. Friends remarked she was a shell of her former vibrant self, weighed down by remorse. At times, she would walk through the vineyard near Verona, remembering her and Emilia's carefree youth, tears slipping quietly. Though many presumed the affair was the cause of Emilia's fatal accident, in truth, the tragedy was simply a cruel turn of fate. No matter the circumstances, the impact was irreversible. Alistair wrestled with the idea of reaching out to Natalia, not for romance, but for closure. Ultimately, he sent one handwritten letter. "Natalia, I don't expect forgiveness from you or from myself, but I hope you find peace. I am dedicating my life to the values Emilia represented. I think that's the only way I can honor her now. Alistair." No reply came. Over time, Alistair found a fragile sense of purpose in carrying out the philanthropic endeavors Emilia had started. The Horizon Foundation expanded globally, digging wells in Africa, supporting shelters in war-torn regions, and championing investigative journalism worldwide. In every new project, Alistair saw Emilia's face, heard her voice urging him to do what was right. It was a bittersweet redemption. He could never reclaim her love, but perhaps he could keep her spirit alive. He also quietly funded a memorial in Mexico where she had done her last investigative piece. A plaque bearing her name sat in a small school courtyard, surrounded by children who benefited from the resources she helped provide. In the end, the story of Alistair Pierce and Amelia Williams became a cautionary tale whispered in billionaire circles, a reminder that ambition and power, unchecked by genuine connection and honesty, can lead to ruin. The tragedy underscored that life's most precious bonds are fragile, and betrayal can sever them irreparably. Yet there was also a message of resilience. From the ashes of betrayal, Alistair found a new authenticity, albeit one forged in immense pain. His philanthropic work continued to grow, touching lives around the globe. Though loneliness haunted him, he discovered that service to others brought a measure of solace. And in that quiet dedication, Amelia's legacy glowed brightly, a testament to the enduring power of compassion and truth. Years later, on a crisp autumn morning, Alistair visited Amelia's grave for the first time in a long while. He placed a single white rose on the headstone. The horizon stretched before him, leaves falling gently from nearby trees. He closed his eyes, remembering her laughter, her fierce determination, the way her eyes lit up whenever she talked about helping the underprivileged. In a voice choked with emotion, he whispered, "I'm sorry." The wind rustled the leaves, as if offering a gentle response. As he left, Alistair felt a small flutter of hope flicker in his chest. No matter how deep the sorrow, there was still the promise of redemption in kindness, resilience, and living fully by the values Amelia had championed. The echoes of tragedy lingered, but so did the belief that from the darkness of betrayal one might still find a path toward light, an enduring connection to the love that once was, and to the best of what humanity could be. In the final reckoning, the story of Alistair, Amelia and Natalia stood as a testament to the delicate balance between ambition and moral duty. It taught that authenticity, once lost, is devastatingly difficult to regain, and that every choice, every betrayal, has consequences that ripple out, sometimes with tragic finality. Yet, even in tragedy, seeds of redemption can take root, bearing fruit in the form of renewed compassion and commitment to a higher calling.